France 24, a different take on the news.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.
The French and Indian leaders meet ahead of the G7 summit. The two vow collaboration on climate change, but Macron refuses to challenge Modi over the crackdown in Kashmir. Scrambling to keep Italy away from another election, Italian parties race to come up with a governing coalition. The president has set the deadline for Tuesday. And as the Amazon burns, the Brazilian president lashes out at those sounding the alarm. Jair Bolsonaro says sending money to protect the rainforest interferes with Brazil's sovereignty. Welcome back and thank you for joining us here on France 24. I'm Alison Sargent in Paris. We begin once again here in France, where the French president had a busy day of diplomacy. Emmanuel Macron welcomed the Indian Prime Minister for a working dinner at the Château de Chantilly outside of Paris. The two leaders said they'd work together on climate change, but the French president did not press Modi very hard over his recent crackdown in the disputed region of Kashmir. Peter O'Brien has more.
Meeting the third head of government in one busy day. After receiving the British and Greek prime ministers in Paris earlier on, Emmanuel Macron made his way to the nearby Château de Chantilly to welcome Narendra Modi. In the press conference afterwards, only Macron mentioned one of the biggest issues currently facing India.
I said again that it was up to India and Pakistan to resolve their differences bilaterally, and that it was the responsibility of the two sides to avoid doing any damage that could lead to an escalation.
Earlier this month, Modi's Hindu nationalist government scrapped the constitutional autonomy of the Muslim-majority region of Kashmir. It sparked protests and angered neighbouring Pakistan. Historically, India's Western allies have avoided weighing in on the issue, and this seems to be Macron's approach as well. The pact agenda also included global warming, defence, nuclear energy and counter-terrorism. The two leaders said the first of 36 French fighter jets ordered by India will be delivered next month. The deal's been the centre of allegations by the Indian opposition that it cost too much and involved corruption. The meeting comes before a G7 summit in southwest France, which Modi has been invited to.
The fact that President Macron has invited me to attend the G7 summit is testament to the strategic partnership between India and France, and to his friendship with me.
Paris wants to overcome the United States' friction with the G7 by involving another big democracy, which it says plays a key role in global affairs.
Well, before heading off to meet Narendra Modi, Emmanuel Macron sat down with Britain's new Prime Minister at the presidential palace. It's Boris Johnson's first trip as Britain's leader, and he's on a mission to convince his European counterparts to renegotiate the Brexit deal hammered out by his predecessor. Delano de Souza has the details.
A hastily planned trip to Paris by Britain's Prime Minister. A month into his new job, Boris Johnson is pleading his case to reopen Brexit negotiations as the end of October deadline fast approaches.
We can get a deal, and a good deal. I know that with energy and with creativity and application, we can find a way forward.
The French president acknowledged he's adopted a tougher stance when it came to Brexit, even though he left open the door to Britain finding a solution to its main sticking point, the Irish backstop.
In the next month, we're not going to find a new withdrawal agreement, which is far from the original. If elements from what was originally negotiated can be amended and conforms to two objectives, stability in Ireland and the integrity of the single market, we'll find it in the next month. If not, that means the problem is deeper, that it's more political, a British political problem.
Boris Johnson's meeting in Paris comes a day after he met Angela Merkel in Berlin. During those talks, the German Chancellor threw Britain a bone by suggesting solutions to the backstop could be found. And on Thursday, she extended that timeline even further.
I said that what one can achieve in 2 or 3 years can also be achieved in 30 days. To put it differently, one can also achieve it by October 31st. So 30 days was symbolic for saying that it's possible to achieve it in a short period.
While Boris Johnson has reiterated the UK is ready to leave the bloc with or without a deal in hand, the British pound reacted positively to news Paris and Berlin are ready to be more flexible than before.
Well, if the UK leaves the EU without a deal, it would abruptly end freedom of movement, a scenario that raises big questions for citizens on both sides of the English Channel.
Will people soon need a visa to travel between the UK and France? For these British citizens arriving in Paris's Gare du Nord, the idea is unthinkable.
It's impossible. There are historical ties between England and France.
It would be a bad thing, but it would be a bad thing for the other side as well.
It's the same sentiment for these French travellers on their way to London.
Well, I won't go to England anymore. There are other countries to see in the world.
Boris Johnson's threats are worrying for this port situated on the north coast of France. Ouistreham has prepared itself for Brexit by creating separate zones for customs and security, but isn't ready for potential reintroduction of visas.
If this threat were actually carried out, we would have to make some adjustments so that passengers could park and wait to go through security checks in comfort.
A hard Brexit could also complicate life for companies specialising in international trade, like this customs agent.
It's going to cause problems in terms of both personal and professional travel when we're dealing with the UK, organising a visa for each driver for when they work in Britain. Will it be a one-time visa or permanent or semi-permanent visa? There are still lots of difficult things to work out.
The possibility of having to apply for a visa could be one more thing to think about for the 4 million French people who visit the UK every year.
The Italian president has given Italy's various parties until Tuesday to form a viable ruling coalition. The latest round of political turmoil was triggered by the far-right Matteo Salvini, who is banking on his party to win an eventual election. But the plan may backfire if his rivals manage to strike a deal and avoid the polls. Yana Lee brings us the latest.
The clock is ticking for Italian party leaders. President Sergio Mattarella has given them a new deadline to find a solution to the political deadlock.
I will hold new consultations which will begin next Tuesday in order to reach a conclusion and to make the necessary decisions.
This gives the Five Star Movement extra time to find a new partner. The ruling coalition with the far-right Lega party has broken down, but Luigi Di Maio hopes the current parliament stays put, even if it means joining forces with former rivals.
We won't let the ship sink. We won't let Italians pay for this crisis because we are all Italians, regardless of our political allegiances and our partisan interests.
Italy's Democratic Party says it's open to joining the government, but with several conditions attached. The centre-left doesn't want to compromise on EU policy, climate change, migration and living standards. The party's leader also asked that former Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte be left out of any new government, accusing him of giving Matteo Salvini free rein during his tenure. Meanwhile, the Lega continues to call for a snap election.
I'm not the first person to have said this, but today the only path to follow is the path to elections. We can't have a power game or a government that does not want to do things.
Earlier Thursday, the leaders of right-wing parties Forza Italia and the Brothers of Italy also expressed their desire to return to the polls. Together, the three parties hope they have enough popular support to win a majority.
Moving away from Europe into Brazil, where the president is under increasing scrutiny over record fires in the Amazon rainforest. Conservationists say Jair Bolsonaro has encouraged loggers and farmers to clear the land. Bolsonaro admitted Thursday that farmers could be illegally starting the fires. Meanwhile, as foreign leaders voiced their concern, Bolsonaro lashed out and accused them of meddling. Alexander Ockott has more.
This crowd at a UN climate conference in Brazil heckled the Brazilian representative as he tried to lay the blame for the wildfires elsewhere. Among them, Argentina's environment minister, who said the world's resources cannot go on being used without limit.
We have to move from a green agenda to a rights-based agenda, and the environment is a right for all the inhabitants of the planet, wherever they are.
Planting a tree outside the venue, Chile's environment minister said the disaster should serve as a wake-up call.
The wildfires we are seeing are a call to the world to take measures to reduce greenhouse gases and transform our economic development. The changes and crisis on the planet, also here in Brazil, are strong and clear calls for action.
With the destruction making world headlines, the UN Secretary-General took to Twitter to say he's deeply concerned about the fires. In the midst of the global climate crisis, we cannot afford more damage to a major source of oxygen and biodiversity. Meanwhile, the French president tweeted with alarm, saying, "Our house is burning, literally," going on to write that it's an international crisis that should be high on the agenda at this weekend's G7 summit. The Brazilian president's response to mounting international criticism has been combative. Jair Bolsonaro accused Emmanuel Macron of having a, quote, colonial mentality for rallying G7 countries to discuss the wildfires without the participation of Brazil. He's also blamed some NGOs for starting the blazes without evidence, adding that donations given by countries to help save the Amazon rainforest are not done for charity, but to interfere with Brazilian sovereignty.
It's been nearly 2 years since tens of thousands of Rohingya Muslims began fleeing a wave of violence in Myanmar to seek refuge in neighboring Bangladesh. This Thursday, hundreds of families were set to begin returning to their homes, but as Wasim Cornet reports, none of them have agreed to go back.
A meeting point for displaced Rohingyas, but not a soul in sight. This Thursday was set to mark the beginning of large-scale repatriation of Rohingya refugees from Bangladesh to Myanmar. 295 families had been interviewed by the Bangladeshi government and the UN's refugee agency since Tuesday. But when it came to actually returning to Myanmar, not one person showed up.
Of the families we have interviewed so far, we haven't found any yet who are willing to go back. But we hope they may change their mind. The safety and security measures we have taken so far have also helped assure them that they have nothing to fear and help them believe that we won't repatriate them forcibly.
But it is in fact those safety and security measures that Rohingya refugees are saying are not enough. The displaced civilians have long demanded that Myanmar give them citizenship, protect them from hate crimes, and return property that was taken from them.
They asked whether we want to go to Myanmar. We said that we won't go without justice. Our assets have to be returned. Houses should also have to be provided to the Rohingyas detained in Mangdao jail. Only then will we go back to Myanmar.
More than 700,000 Rohingya Muslims have fled Myanmar in the past 2 years after the country's military began a massive and indiscriminate counterinsurgency campaign. The operation involved mass rapes, killings, and the burning of homes. Myanmar has refused to recognize Rohingyas as citizens, effectively making them stateless.
And finally, we head to space, where Russia has sent humans, monkeys, dogs, and now a humanoid robot. Fedor took off from a Russian base in Kazakhstan this Thursday. His mission is to spend 10 days learning to assist astronauts on board the International Space Station.
A routine liftoff for this Soyuz rocket from the Baikonur spaceport in Kazakhstan. Its destination, the International Space Station. But the passenger manifest on this flight is anything but routine. Meet Fedor, Russia's first life-size humanoid robot. The trip's goal is to test a new emergency rescue system in order to see whether an unmanned rocket carrying a robot could help out astronauts in distress. Fedor will also be spending 10 days aboard the ISS, learning how to assist astronauts and perfecting skills such as connecting cables and using a screwdriver or a fire extinguisher in a low-gravity environment. The 1-meter-80, 160-kilogram robot has its own Twitter and Instagram accounts where it will be keeping enthusiasts informed of its progress. Russia hopes Fedor and other humanoid robots will be able to carry out even more dangerous tasks in the long run, like performing spacewalks or working in high-radiation environments back on Earth.
We're going to have to leave it there, but stay with us. More news coming up soon.
What does an Artlist subscription cover? Well, everything.
Do you cover broadcast commercials?
We cover everything.
But now I have 50,000 subscribers.
Awesome. Still covered.
But what if...
Everything.
Wait, and if I'm filming a show?
Everything.
But my channel views?
Everything.
Wow. Cool.
One price, one simple license. We've got you covered. For everything. Start now and get your license.